consciousness when I'm sleeping, and that makes it very clear to me that consciousness does not need the body. But it also made me wonder, how is consciousness experienced when the body dies?
Well, the experience of consciousness is twofold. There is a subjective experience of it, and there is the objective experience of it, whatever it manifests. The objective experience of it changes all the time. The subjective experience of it doesn't change. That remains true after the death of the body, because it's universally true. Because the subjective part of consciousness, of the experience, is beyond the body-mind. Therefore, it is not dependent upon what happens to the body-mind. I mean, that's the, if you will, the intellectual explanation for it. Be open to the possibility that the consciousness is beyond the mind and not affected by the mind. Consciousness affects the mind, but the mind doesn't affect consciousness, if you will. Yes. So therefore, the death of the body, mind, it relates only to the body-mind. So the experience of consciousness remains the same because it is not affected by whatever affects the body-mind. Whatever affects the body-mind is part of the perceived, if you will, element of consciousness.
Yes.
That definitely changes. But the perceived, and what we have to realize is that that which we are attached to, really, is a changeless part of consciousness, not the changing part. That's the difference between ignorance and wisdom. In ignorance, we are attached to some of the changing elements. And of course, that's the source of misery, because by nature, the changing elements are going to change. And if we are attached to them, we are going to be disappointed, we are going to suffer. So if we are attached to that which doesn't change and cannot leave us, it's a good kind of attachment, because there is no disappointment there, you see. And so realize that that which you are truly in love with and that which you are naturally attached to is a subjective part of consciousness. Is consciousness itself, in other words, not the projections. It is only the mind which has this kind of curiosity. What's going to happen to me when I die? When the mind dies, the mind is dead. It's tantamount to say, what happens to a thought when the thought dies? You see, I have the thought of a pink elephant, then the thought goes. What has happened to the thought? My answer is, who cares? You see what I mean? We have problems only as long as we have in some remote nooks and crannies of the mind this belief that consciousness is dependent upon the mind and upon the body. Now I have even a more satisfactory answer to the question, what happens when the body dies? What happens to you, to consciousness? And the answer is, first of all, nothing happens to you as consciousness. But you could ask, what will it be like? You know, what kind of movie am I going to watch? And the answer to that is simple. Whatever movie you choose to watch. So there is nothing to worry about. Mm-hmm. Since you are the decider in chief. You see what I mean? As consciousness, you are the only decider. So whatever is your desire at this moment, you can create it, manifest it. So whatever you want to watch, you're going to watch. So there is nothing to worry about.
So I guess it's not a good idea to be attached to the objective experience of consciousness.
It's ignorance. Ignorance is a bad idea only from the vantage point of ignorance. From the vantage point of wisdom, who cares?
Yes, that's true.
Because again, it's a choice you make. You see what it's your decision again. So if you like to play this game, why not? It's a free country, you see. So. So ignorance is not really a problem. It's a spice of the world. So those days, for instance, the world tends to be Indian. Little hot.
Thank you. I just have another question, if you don't mind. I was reading something in a book, one of the books from Ramana Maharishi, and he says, there was a sentence that said that there is no world without the mind. In the sense, like the world is basically existing because of the mind. And I started thinking about that, or started investigating that. And I'm sorry if my question is not going to be very clearly formulated, but I do experience that the mind doesn't really exist, like separate from thought. I can see that it's actually thought. The mind is actually thought, and I haven't really seen a mind, so I don't know if it exists. But if it's just thought, that means if the world is created because of thought, then am I in a dream, or is there really a world appearing in me, or am I appearing in the world? Sometimes I'm not sure about that.
It depends what you mean by me. It depends whether by me you mean consciousness, or whether you mean the body-mind.
No, I don't.
No, if you mean the body is appearing in the world. If you mean the mind, the world is appearing in the mind. If you mean consciousness, both
are appearing in consciousness. So there's no real world, because it seems like the reality of the world is based on in the sense, if consciousness is real and the world appears in consciousness, then world should have some aspect of reality as well.
Yeah,
so
yes. But when we ask the question, is there a real world? What do we mean by real? You see, because the word real may have various meanings. Usually, what is meant by real is something independent. Reality involves the notion of independence. For instance, when we say that the reality of the ring is the gold, it means, it's perhaps not let's say that the reality of the wave is the water, right? Even that is, but you cannot have a water wave without the water. However, you can have the water in the ice form or vapor form without waves, right? So the fact that shows that the water is more real than the wave.
Yes.
In that sense, because you cannot have the wave without the water. However, you can have the water without the wave. So there is a notion of of dependency of one with regard to that which is less real is dependent upon that which is more real, in that sense. So, going back to your question, the reality of the world, right? It depends. If we ask the question, for instance, does the world have a reality independently from human mind? The answer is yes. It's different from the question, can we perceive the world without the human mind? No.
No.
Right? But does the world have a reality without, independently from the human mind? Yes, because if you take any specific human mind, and if this human mind is not perceiving New York City, for instance, that doesn't mean that New York City is not perceived by other minds.
Yes.
Therefore, there is something to New York City which is independent from this specific mind.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So therefore, you could apply the same line of reasoning to any specific mind, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the outcome of that is that New York City is independent from, has an existence which is independent from any specific mind.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So it is a very different question from, is the world independent from consciousness?
No.
You see, so that's very different. So if we identify consciousness in ignorance, we identify consciousness with mind. So then it seems that in ignorance we have the choice only between two options. One option which is, according to which the world is dependent upon my mind for its existence, which leads to solipsism, which is a very untenable philosophical position, if you will, because everybody else sees how stupid you are. I mean, how mistaken you are, right? And the other solution is to grant some existence to the world independently from human mind. However, with consciousness it's different because that leaves open the possibility that consciousness is the reality of both minds and world.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because, so for example, this afternoon when, during meditation, I was looking at an image and then I closed my eyes and I could see the same image when I closed my eyes, which made me also wonder if what I'm seeing is actually an image in me, that there is really no world that is existing outside of me.
It depends on what you call by
Me.
in me, right? You see? The world exists, let's put it this way.
Body, mind.
That's very important, to be open to the possibility that the world has an existence independently from any mind. That to me, that seems obvious. Different from our perception of the world, that's something different, So our perception of the world seems to be dependent on mind, right? But ultimately, it doesn't matter if the reality of the world and the reality of mind, consciousness, are the same. In other words, if there is only one reality, what Advaitam means only one reality. You see, so then the reality that perceives and the reality that perceives and the reality of that which is perceived are the same reality. That's a direct consequence of Advaitam. And then there is no contradiction. It goes very. You know, it's very beautiful because it's a religion without a God. You know, it has always been said, often been said that Buddhism is a religion without a God. That's not quite true of Buddhism because of the Buddha, but with Advaita, yes, there is only that reality.
Yeah,
I mean, what I said about Buddhism, I'm talking about some forms of Buddhism.
Yeah, I guess the confusion came because I was looking at it from a body-mind perspective, not as consciousness.
Yes.
Because then, as consciousness, everything is appearing in me as consciousness. But as body-mind, I just wasn't sure if it was still appearing inside me or...
It could be said that as consciousness, whatever is manifested is a very tiny fraction of whatever can be manifested. You see what I mean? And that which can be manifested exists as potentiality, as this consciousness that perceives. It's like someone who has a very, very, you know, in Japan, here with our paintings, we tend to put them, to cover the walls with them. And over there with their rolls, their paintings, they have a box and they are all rolled and they stay there. And they take one and that's a painting of the week, of the painting of the month, and they have a place where they show it. And then when they are bored with it, they roll it back, and that's the movies of the TV of the of the tradition, of the, you know. And that is a good metaphor about consciousness. Unmanifested consciousness, everything is rolled up in the box, right? And the mind is the one which is shown. That this box is infinite.
Thank you.